When Dante Bianchi walked through his mansion door at 3 a.m., reeking of expensive perfume that wasn't his wife's, he expected tears, maybe accusations. What he got instead was an envelope on the marble table and a woman walking away without a single word. Inside that envelope was everything: divorce papers, a USB drive, and 3 years of evidence that would dismantle a criminal empire in 72 hours. The mafia boss who'd spent 15 years building an untouchable kingdom had just been checkmated by the one person he never bothered to see. This is the story of how power crumbles when you ignore the architect who built it. If you want to see how this unfolds, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. when Dante Bianchi's car pulled through the iron gates of his estate. The headlights swept across the fountain in the circular driveway, catching droplets of water mid-spray before the engine cut to silence. He sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, letting the quiet settle around him. The house loomed dark except for a single light in the kitchen window. He told himself he'd be home by midnight. That had been 6 hours ago. Dante grabbed his jacket from the passenger seat and stepped out. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the smell of jasmine from the garden. He straightened his collar, ran a hand through his dark hair, and headed for the door. His shoes clicked against the stone pathway with a rhythm he'd walked 1,000 times before. The front door was unlocked. It always was when Elena was awake. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of recessed lighting. Everything in its place, everything clean, the kind of perfection that happened when someone cared enough to maintain it, day after day, without acknowledgement or thanks. Dante tossed his keys onto the console table and walked toward the light. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger than 34. No makeup, no jewelry except the wedding ring she'd worn for 8 years. She didn't look up when he entered. "You're awake," he said. She nodded once. Still didn't meet his eyes. He walked to the cabinet, pulled out a glass, and poured himself whiskey from the crystal decanter on the counter. The liquid caught the light as it fell, amber and warm. He took a drink, felt it burn down his throat. "I had business," he said. "I'm sure you did." Her voice was quiet, calm, too calm. Dante turned to look at her properly. That's when he noticed the envelope on the table. White, letter-sized, sitting exactly in the center like it had been measured. "What's that?" he asked. "Open it." He set his glass down and walked over, pulling out the chair across from her. The leather creaked as he sat. He picked up the envelope. No writing on the outside. He unsealed the flap and pulled out the contents. The first thing he saw was the divorce petition. His name typed at the top in bold letters. Dante Michael Bianchi, respondent. The legal language blurred together as his eyes scanned the page. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Dissolution of marriage. He looked up. "This is a joke." Elena's expression didn't change. "You're actually—" He stopped himself, shook his head. "What is this, Elena? You upset because I came home late?" "I'm not upset." "Then what do you call this?" He dropped the papers on the table. She reached across and slid them back toward him. "I call it done." Dante laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was rage, and he'd learned long ago not to let that show, until he understood the board. He picked up the envelope again and pulled out the second item. A USB drive. Black. Generic. The kind you could buy at any electronics store. "What's on this?" he asked. "Everything." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Dante turned the drive over in his fingers. "You want to explain that?" Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were clear. No tears. No anger. Just a kind of exhausted certainty that made something cold settle in his chest. 3 years, she said. Every transaction, every meeting, every name, every date, every shipment, all of it. He went very still. "You're lying." "You can check." His hand closed around the USB drive. "Why would you, Because you forgot I existed," she said simply. "You stopped seeing me so completely that you had entire conversations in this house like I wasn't in the room. You made phone calls at the dinner table, left documents on your desk, Talked to your men in the driveway while I was gardening 10 feet away. She paused. You taught me how to be invisible, Dante. I just got good at it. He stared at her. His mind was racing, cataloging every moment, every slip, every time he'd assumed his wife was too busy with her books and her flowers to pay attention to the real world. If you walk out that door, he said slowly, I'll find you. You know that. I know. There's nowhere you can go that I won't reach. Maybe. She stood up, pushing her chair back with a soft scrape. But by the time you do, none of it will matter anymore. What's that supposed to mean? Elena picked up her purse from the counter. It was already packed. He hadn't even noticed it sitting there. The USB has a twin, she said, and instructions. If I don't check in every 72 hours, it gets delivered. Federal prosecutors, FBI, Interpol, every agency that's been trying to touch you for a decade. She walked toward the doorway, then stopped. Looked back at him one last time. You spent 15 years building an empire, Dante. I spent 3 years learning how to erase it. Elena. But she was already gone. He heard her footsteps in the hallway. The sound of the front door opening, closing. The click of it latching felt louder than it should have. Dante sat alone in the kitchen, the USB drive heavy in his palm, and told himself it was a bluff. It had to be. He didn't sleep. By 4 a.m., he was in his office on the second floor, the USB drive plugged into his laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness as folder after folder loaded onto the desktop. Files, hundreds of them. Audio recordings, scanned documents, spreadsheets, photographs. Dante opened the first audio file at random. His own voice filled the room. Tell Ramos if he doesn't have the shipment ready by Thursday, I'm finding someone who will... He closed it. Opened another. 40 keys, clean, nothing traced back. Another. DeMarco's been skimming. I want him gone by the end of the week. His hands were shaking. He opened a spreadsheet. Columns of dates, amounts, locations. Every offshore account he'd opened in the last 8 years. The Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. Numbers that should have been untouchable, buried under shell companies and proxies. All of it laid out like a fucking ledger. Dante shoved back from the desk and stood, pacing to the window. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, dark blue fading to gray. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. He looked older than he had yesterday. His phone buzzed on the desk. He grabbed it. A text from Marco, his second in command. Boss, we got a problem. Call me. Dante dialed. Marco picked up on the first ring. We've been hit. What? The warehouse on 9th. Feds came through an hour ago with warrants. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Took everything. Product, records, computers. They even knew about the safe in the back office. Dante's jaw tightened. How much did we lose? 2 million in product. Maybe another million in equipment. Marco's voice dropped. But that's not the worst part. Talk. They had documentation, boss. Receipts. Shipping manifests. Things that should have been destroyed months ago. Someone gave them a roadmap. Dante closed his eyes. Anyone picked up? 3 guys, all singing already from what I hear. Who's their lawyer? Don't have one yet. They're talking before they even asked. That meant leverage. The kind of leverage that came from having no hope left. Pull everyone back, Dante said. Full shutdown until I know what we're looking at. Already done. But Dante... Marco hesitated. There's talk. People are asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind about whether you still got this. Dante ended the call and threw the phone onto the desk. It skittered across the wood and stopped just before the edge. He turned back to the laptop, opened another file. A photograph of him shaking hands with Councilman Reeves outside a restaurant downtown. The date stamp read 14 months ago. The same week Reeves had pushed through the zoning variance that let Dante buy the Port District properties. Another photo. Him and State Senator Caldwell at a charity gala. Caldwell's hand on his shoulder, both of them smiling for the camera. The caption underneath read, $250,000 campaign contribution, December 2019. She'd been building a case file, not just evidence, a narrative. Dante sat down slowly. The chair felt too small suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. He thought about Elena, about the way she used to sit in the corner of his office sometimes, reading while he worked, He thought it was sweet, domestic, the kind of thing wives did when they wanted to be near their husbands. He'd never once asked what she was reading, never noticed when she looked up at the exact moment someone said something incriminating, never saw her memorizing names, dates, details. His phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Victor, who ran the East Side operations. Accounts frozen. All of them. Need access now. Dante stared at the message. Typed back, which accounts? The response came instantly. All of them. He pulled up his banking app, entered his credentials for the primary Cayman account. The screen loaded. Access denied. Account frozen pending federal investigation. He tried the Swiss account. Same message. Singapore, Panama, Cyprus. All frozen. 15 years of carefully hidden money, locked down overnight. Dante stood and walked out of the office, down the hallway, past the bedroom he used to share with Elena. The door was open. The bed was made. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had, except now there was a space on the dresser where her jewelry box used to sit. He went downstairs through the living room into the kitchen. The envelope was still on the table where he'd left it. He picked up the divorce papers again, read through them properly this time. She wasn't asking for anything. No alimony, no property, no split of assets. She just wanted out. That scared him more than anything else, because Elena had never been stupid. If she wasn't taking anything in the divorce, it was because she didn't need to, which meant she'd already taken what she wanted before she left. Dante pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. "It's early," Sophia said. Her voice was thick with sleep. "I need to see you." "Now?" "Yes." A pause, then softer. "What's wrong?" "I'll tell you when I get there." He hung up before she could ask anything else. Sophia's apartment was in the Pearl District, a high-rise with a doorman and views of the river. Dante had bought it for her 2 years ago. She decorated it in shades of cream and gold, everything expensive and tasteful in the way of women who knew how to spend someone else's money. She opened the door in a silk robe, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "You look like hell." "Let me in." She stepped aside. The apartment smelled like vanilla candles and the wine she'd probably been drinking before bed. Dante walked past her into the living room and stood by the window, looking out at the city starting to wake up below. Sophia closed the door and followed him. "What happened?" "Elena left me." "Oh." She didn't sound surprised. "Finally figured it out, did she?" Dante turned. "Figured what out?" Sophia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That you're a shit husband, Dante. Come on, you're here more than you're there. What did you think was going to happen?" "She took files," he said. "Evidence. She's been documenting everything for 3 years. The smile faded. "Everything?" "Everything." Sophia sat down on the edge of the couch. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely worried. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "Can you stop her?" "I don't even know where she is." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she stood and walked to the bar cart, poured herself a drink. She didn't offer him one. "So what do you need from me?" That's when Dante realized he didn't have an answer. He'd come here out of a habit, because this was where he went when things got complicated, when he needed to feel like himself again. But standing in this apartment, looking at this woman who'd shared his bed but never his life, he understood something he'd been avoiding for hours. Sophia didn't matter. None of this mattered. Not the apartment, not the comfort, not the illusion of escape. Elena had just burned down his entire world, and the only thing he could think to do was run to his mistress like she could fix it. "I should go," he said. Sophia set her glass down. "Dante, I'll call you later." He left before she could say anything else. By the time he got back to the estate, the sun was fully up. There were 2 black SUVs parked in his driveway, federal plates. Dante pulled up slowly, put the car in park, watched as 4 agents in windbreakers emerged from the vehicles, FBI emblazoned across their backs in yellow letters. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail. She walked up to his window and knocked on the glass. Dante rolled it down. "Dante Bianche?" "That's right." She held up a badge. "Special Agent Carmen Reyes, FBI. We have a warrant to search the premises." She handed him the paperwork through the window. Dante scanned it. The warrant was thorough, comprehensive. It listed specific rooms, specific items, specific locations within his own house. Someone had told them exactly where to look. "You're welcome to wait inside while we execute the search," Agent Reyes said. "Or you can leave and we'll contact you when we're finished." Dante looked at her. "How long have you been building this case?" She didn't blink. "Long enough." He got out of the car and walked past them into his house. 2 more agents were already inside, photographing the kitchen. One of them was bagging the envelope Elena had left on the table. Dante went upstairs to his office. An agent was already there, boxing up files from his desk. "You can't take those," Dante said. The agent looked up. "We have a warrant, Mr. Bianchi. We can take whatever's listed." "Those are private documents." "Not anymore." Dante stood in the doorway and watched as they dismantled his office piece by piece. Files, hard drives, the laptop he'd been using just hours ago to review Elena's files, all of it going into evidence boxes and being carried out of his house like trash. His phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Turn on the news," Marco said. Dante went to the bedroom and grabbed the remote. Turned on the television. The local news was already running the story. Federal raid on alleged crime boss. They had aerial footage of his house. The SUVs in the driveway. Agents walking in and out with boxes. The anchor's voice was crisp and professional. Federal authorities executed multiple search warrants this morning in connection with an ongoing investigation into organized crime. Sources say the target is Dante Bianchi, a prominent local businessman with alleged ties to illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and money laundering. This follows a series of raids on properties across the city overnight. Dante turned it off, walked back downstairs. Agent Reyes was in the living room supervising the removal of a painting from the wall. Behind it was a safe. She looked at Dante. "You want to open that, or should we?" He didn't answer. She nodded to one of the other agents, who stepped forward with a drill. Dante turned and walked out of his own house. The next 48 hours were a blur. More raids, more arrests, more accounts frozen. By Friday, 11 of his people were in custody. 6 had already flipped, offering testimony in exchange for reduced sentences. The ones who hadn't were sitting in holding cells, waiting for lawyers who couldn't help them. Dante's face was on every news channel. Photographs from charity events, business conferences, social gatherings. All of it recontextualized now as evidence of a criminal enterprise. His lawyers told him not to talk to anyone, to stay off social media, to prepare for the worst. Sophia stopped returning his calls by Saturday. He went to her apartment Sunday morning and found it empty. Furniture gone, closets cleared out, like she'd never been there at all. The doorman wouldn't look him in the eye. Dante stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows onto bare hardwood floors, and finally let himself feel it. The rage, the humiliation, the comprehension of just how thoroughly he'd been destroyed. Elena had done this. The woman who used to make him coffee in the morning, who smiled at his terrible jokes, who kept his house running like clockwork while he barely noticed she existed. She'd taken everything he'd built and handed it to the government with a bow on top. And the worst part, the part that made him want to put his fist through a wall, was that she'd used his own playbook to do it. Patience, planning, leverage, all the lessons he'd taught his men about how to survive in this world, she'd absorbed and turned against him. He'd been outplayed by someone he'd never even considered an opponent. The call came on Monday. "Mr. Bianchi, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park. I think it's time we talked." They met at a federal building downtown. Dante brought his lawyer, a man named Hirsch, who charged $800 an hour and had built a career on keeping wealthy criminals out of prison. Hirsch didn't look optimistic. They were led to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Gray walls, a table that had seen better days. Agent Reyes was there, along with 2 other agents Dante didn't recognize. At the head of the table sat a woman in her 30s wearing a navy suit and an expression that said she'd already won. Jennifer Park stood and shook Hirsch's hand, ignored Dante completely. "Thank you for coming," she said. Hirsch pulled out a chair. "Let's skip the pleasantries. What are we looking at?" Park sat down and opened a folder. "Racketeering, money laundering, drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, tax evasion, witness tampering. That's just what we're confident we can prove. We're still going through the evidence. Evidence that was obtained illegally, Hirsch said. Park smiled. Actually, it was obtained by a private citizen who voluntarily turned it over to law enforcement. Your client's wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, I should say. Nothing illegal about that. Dante leaned forward. Where is she? Park looked at him for the first time. Somewhere you'll never find her. She's under federal protection now. Has been since the moment she walked out of your house. You can't. We can, Park said. And we did. Mrs. Bianchi came to us 3 months ago with a proposal. She'd deliver evidence of your entire operation in exchange for immunity and protection. We accepted. 3 months ago. Dante thought back. 3 months ago was February, the week of his birthday. Elena had thrown him a party. 50 people at the house. Champagne and catered food and a cake that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She'd smiled the whole night. Stood beside him while people toasted his success. Kissed him when they cut the cake. And apparently she'd already been working with the FBI. How much does she know? Hirsch asked. Everything, Agent Reyes said. She pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. 3 years of audio recordings, financial documents, eyewitness testimony, photographs. She built us a case that would take our white-collar division a decade to assemble. Dante looked at the tablet. The screen showed a list of files, thousands of them, all organized by date, by subject, by relevance to specific charges. It was meticulous, professional, the work of someone who'd spent years learning exactly how his world operated. We're offering a deal, Park said. Shiram, you plead to racketeering and money laundering. You give us full cooperation on your associates, your suppliers, your distribution network. In exchange, we take the death penalty off the table and recommend 25 years. Hirsch didn't move. That's not a deal. That's a life sentence. He's 46, Park said. With good behavior, he could be out in 15. That's better than death row. My client has committed no crimes. Park laughed. Actually laughed. Mr. Hirsch, we have your client on tape ordering 3 murders. We have bank records showing $200 million in laundered money. We have testimony from 8 cooperating witnesses. This isn't a negotiation. This is me being generous. Dante looked at her. I want to see my wife. No. You want a lot of things, Mr. Bianchi. None of them matter anymore. Park closed the folder. You have 72 hours to accept the deal. After that, we're adding charges and the offer goes away. She stood. The agents followed her out. Dante and Hirsch sat alone in the conference room. What do you think? Dante asked quietly. Hirsch was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think your wife just ended your life. That night, Dante sat in his office and opened Elena's files one more time. He'd been through them a dozen times now, but he kept coming back. Trying to understand. Trying to find the moment when it all went wrong. There was a folder near the bottom labeled Personal. He'd avoided it until now. Hadn't wanted to see whatever was inside. He clicked it open. Photos. Not evidence, just photos. Pictures of them. From before. Their wedding day. Elena in a white dress, laughing at something off camera. Him looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Their honeymoon in Italy. The two of them standing in front of the Trevi Fountain. Christmas morning, 3 years ago. Elena opening a present while he watched from the couch. There were more recent ones, too. From the last year or two. Him at dinner with his associates while she sat at the end of the table, barely visible in the frame. Him on his phone during an anniversary dinner. Him asleep on the couch while she sat alone in the kitchen. The dates were all there. Documented, filed away. A record of exactly when she'd stopped existing to him. Dante closed the laptop, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights stretching into the distance and finally understood what Elena had been trying to tell him in the kitchen that night. This wasn't about the crimes. It wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And he'd failed at that so completely that she'd spent 3 years meticulously destroying him just to prove she'd been there all along. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You taught me everything I needed to know. Thank you for that. E. Dante stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then he sat down in the leather chair that had cost more than some people's cars and realized he had nothing left to do but wait for the consequences of his own blindness to catch up with him. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, everything had already stopped. The meeting with Hirsch the next morning lasted 20 minutes before Dante realized his lawyer had already given up. They sat in Hirsch's downtown office, surrounded by mahogany and leather and diplomas from schools that cost more per year than most people earned. Through the window, the city sprawled out in every direction, indifferent to the collapse happening in this room. Hirsch pushed a legal pad across the desk. On it were columns of numbers, each one worse than the last. "This is what we're facing," he said. "Conservative estimate puts you at 40 years minimum if we go to trial. That's assuming we win on half the charges, which we won't. The recordings alone are enough to bury you." Dante stared at the numbers. "What about the evidence? Can't we challenge how it was obtained? She was your wife. She had legal access to your home, your office, your files. There's no Fourth Amendment violation when the person collecting evidence lives there." Hirsch leaned back in his chair. "The only angle we have is arguing spousal privilege, but that died the moment she filed for divorce and declared herself a cooperating witness." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying take the deal. 25 years is better than life." Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Another account frozen. This one in Montenegro. He'd forgotten that one even existed. "I need more time," Dante said. "You have 72 hours. That's not negotiable." Hirsch closed the file in front of him. "And Dante? Start thinking about what you can give them. Names, locations, operations. The more you cooperate, the better the sentencing recommendation." "You want me to rat?" "I want you to survive." Dante stood. "I'll call you tomorrow." He left before Hirsch could respond. Outside, the morning was bright and cold. Traffic moved in steady streams down the avenue. People walked past him on the sidewalk, coffee cups in hand, headed to jobs that didn't involve federal indictments or asset seizures. Normal lives. The kind of life Elena was probably living right now, somewhere the FBI had hidden her. His phone rang. Marco. "We got another problem," Marco said without preamble. "What now?" "Tony's missing. Hasn't checked in since yesterday. His apartment's cleaned out." Tony Galante, one of his most reliable earners. A guy who'd been with the organization for 12 years. "He run?" Dante asked. "Looks like it. But boss, if he's talking, I know what it means." Another domino, another name on the prosecution's witness list, another piece of testimony that would put him away forever. "What do you want me to do?" Marco asked. Dante looked at the people walking past him, strangers who had no idea who he was or what was happening. "Nothing. There's nothing to do." "Dante, I mean it. Pull back, shut everything down, tell everyone to lawyer up and keep their mouths shut." "And you?" "I'm working on it." He ended the call and started walking. No destination in mind, just movement because standing still felt impossible. He found himself on the waterfront an hour later, watching container ships move across the harbor. This was where it had started, 15 years ago. Small operations. Moving product through the docks, bribing the right people, building connections one handshake at a time. Now those same docks were probably under federal surveillance. Those same connections were probably cooperating witnesses. Everything he'd built, dismantled in less than a week. His phone buzzed again. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Dante. It's Victor. They got me. I'm sorry." He stared at the message. Victor Reyes, his oldest friend in the business, a guy who'd been there from the beginning, who'd stood beside him through wars with rival crews, through close calls with law enforcement, through years of risk and reward. Now he was apologizing from a federal holding cell. Dante typed back, "Don't say anything. I'll get you a lawyer." The response came immediately. "Too late. I already talked. They have everything. I'm sorry." The phone nearly slipped from Dante's hand. Victor had been at the house dozens of times, had sat at the dinner table with him and Elena, had probably said things in front of her that now existed on one of those audio files. Elena had gotten him too. Dante called Hirsch. "Victor flipped," he said when the lawyer answered. "I heard. Park's office called me an hour ago. They wanted me to know they have his testimony locked." "What did he give them?" "According to their filing, details on the drug distribution network, names of suppliers, locations of stash houses, wire transfers from offshore accounts." Hirsch paused. He also corroborated several of the recordings, confirmed they're authentic, and that he was present during the conversations. Dante closed his eyes. How bad is it? It's over, Dante. You need to accept that. Don't listen to me. I've been doing this for 23 years. I know when a case is lost. This one was lost before you even knew you were being investigated. Your wife spent 3 years building a wall around you. Now it's closing in. The only question is whether you die in prison or get out while you can still have some kind of life. What life? Dante asked. I'll be 70 when I get out, assuming I live that long. Then you better start thinking about legacy. Because right now, the only thing you're leaving behind is a federal case study on how to get caught. The call ended. Dante stood on the waterfront until the sun started to set. Then he went to the only place left that made any sense, the cemetery where his father was buried. The drive took 40 minutes. By the time he arrived, the light was fading. Long shadows stretched across the headstones. Dante parked near the entrance and walked through rows of granite markers until he found the one he was looking for. Michael Bianchi, 1951 to 2004. Beloved father. His father had been a legitimate businessman, owned a construction company, paid his taxes, went to church on Sundays. He'd wanted Dante to take over the business, to build something clean and legal. Instead, Dante had used the construction company to launder money, had turned his father's legacy into a front for criminal enterprise. The old man had died never knowing what his son had become. Dante knelt in front of the headstone. The grass was damp from the evening dew. He ran his hand over the carved letters of his father's name. I fucked up, he said quietly. You tried to tell me. Build something real, you said. Something that lasts. But I wanted more. I wanted power. I wanted respect. He laughed, but it came out hollow. Guess I got what I deserved. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out in the growing darkness. Elena's gone, Dante continued. She burned it all down, and the worst part, she was right to do it. I stopped seeing anything except the next deal, the next move, the next piece of territory. He paused. You would have liked her. She was smart, strong, the kind of woman who would have kept me honest if I'd let her. But he hadn't let her. He'd kept her at a distance, made her into background noise. Another piece of furniture in a house full of expensive things he never appreciated. Dante stood and brushed the dirt from his knees. I don't know how to fix this. I don't think I can. His father's headstone had no answers. He walked back to the car as full darkness settled over the cemetery. The next morning, he woke to his phone ringing at 6 a.m. It was Hirsch. Turn on the news. Dante grabbed the remote and flipped on the television. The morning news was already covering it. Federal indictment unsealed. Organized crime figure faces RICO charges. The anchor was reading from a prepared statement. Federal prosecutors unsealed a sweeping racketeering indictment this morning against Dante Bianchi, alleging his involvement in a criminal enterprise spanning more than a decade. The indictment lists 47 counts, including murder, drug trafficking, and money laundering. Prosecutors say the case was built with evidence provided by Bianchi's estranged wife, who cooperated with authorities for more than 3 months. They had a photo of Elena on screen. It was from their wedding. She looked young, happy, nothing like the woman who'd walked out of his house a week ago. The anchor continued. Legal experts say this is one of the most comprehensive RICO cases in recent history. If convicted on all counts, Bianchi could face life in prison without parole. Dante muted the television. You still there? Hirsch asked. Yeah. Park's office wants an answer by end of business today. They're not waiting the full 72 hours. Why the rush? Because they're adding more defendants. Your associates are flipping faster than they can process the paperwork. Every hour that passes, they get more evidence. They want you locked in before you realize how much worse it's going to get. Dante looked at Elena's photo on the screen. The smile. The white dress. The woman who'd promised to love him forever. Set up a meeting, he said. I'll give them an answer today. He hung up and sat in the silence of his bedroom. The house felt enormous around him. 10,000 square feet of space he'd barely occupied. Rooms Elena had decorated and maintained while he was out building an empire he thought would last forever. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 15 years acquiring power and property. Now he couldn't even keep his own house. There was a knock on the front door. Dante went downstairs and looked through the peephole. A woman in her 60s stood on the porch, gray hair, kind face, someone's grandmother. He opened the door. "Can I help you?" She handed him an envelope. "You've been served." Then she walked back to her car and drove away. Dante opened the envelope. Civil lawsuit. Elena's attorney was suing for division of assets. The house, the cars, investment properties, all of it. He laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else was there to do? She'd already taken everything that mattered. Now she was just cleaning up the paperwork. The meeting with Park was set for 2 p.m. Dante arrived 15 minutes early. Hirsch was already there, sitting in the lobby with his briefcase across his lap. "You ready?" the lawyer asked. "Does it matter?" They were led to the same conference room as before. Park was waiting with Agent Reyes and 2 other prosecutors Dante hadn't seen before. Park didn't waste time. "Have you made a decision?" Dante sat down. "I want to see the full evidence list first." Park slid a binder across the table. "This is a summary. The full discovery is about 8,000 pages. You'll get access to all of it once you enter a plea." Dante opened the binder. The first page was a table of contents, dozens of categories, each one a different aspect of his operation that Elena had documented. Drug trafficking operations, 247 documented transactions. Money laundering, 89 offshore transfers, $187 million total. Witness intimidation, 14 incidents. Murder. Conspiracy, 3 cases. The numbers went on, each one backed by audio recordings, photographs, financial records. He flipped to a random page. A transcript of a conversation he'd had with Marco 2 years ago about moving product through a new distribution channel. Every word transcribed perfectly. Timestamps, location, context. "Where was she during this one?" Dante asked, pointing to the transcript. Park checked her notes. According to her statement, she was in the kitchen making dinner. You were on the phone in the next room. "I was 10 feet away from her." "Yes. And she just wrote it all down?" "She recorded it," Park said, then transcribed it later. "She was very thorough." Dante closed the binder. "How many recordings are there?" "Audio? About 600 hours. She also kept detailed written notes, photographs, receipts, bank statements. She basically documented your entire operation like she was writing a book." "Why?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Why go through all that effort? She could have just left." Park leaned forward. "You want to know why your wife spent 3 years destroying you?" "Yeah, I do." "Because you gave her no choice." Park's voice was cold. "According to her testimony, she tried talking to you multiple times, asked you to go legitimate, to get out while you could. You dismissed her every time, told her not to worry about business, that she didn't understand how things worked." Dante remembered those conversations. Vaguely. Late-night talks that he thought were just Elena being anxious. He'd patted her hand and told her everything was fine. "She realized you weren't going to stop," Park continued. "So she started planning, learned everything she could about your operation, documented it, built a case, and when she had enough to guarantee you'd never be able to hurt her or anyone else again, she walked away. She could have warned me. Why would she? You didn't listen to her when she was trying to help. Why would you listen when she was trying to leave?" The room was quiet. Hirsch cleared his throat. "Can we focus on the deal?" Park nodded. 25 years, full cooperation. You allocute to all charges. Give us testimony on your suppliers, your associates, your distribution network. In exchange, we recommend concurrent sentencing and a medium security facility. And if I say no, then we go to trial. We win. You get life. And I make it my personal mission to ensure you never see daylight again." Park's expression didn't change. "Your choice, Mr. Bianchi." Dante looked at Hirsch. The lawyer gave a small nod. 25 years. He'd be 71 when he got out. If he got out. But it was better than dying in prison. "I need a minute," Dante said. Park stood. "Take 5. We'll be right outside." The prosecutors and agents filed out. Hirsch started to follow, then stopped. "You know what you have to do." "Yeah." "Then do it. Sign the deal. Start cooperating. Give yourself a chance." When Hirsch left, Dante sat alone in the conference room and thought about Elena. about the woman who'd sat across from him at breakfast every morning for 8 years, who'd asked how his day was, who'd kept his house running while he was out building an empire, who'd been invisible to him right up until the moment she wasn't. He thought about Sophia, about the empty apartment and the furniture that had disappeared overnight, about a woman who'd shared his bed but vanished the second his money dried up. He thought about his father's grave, about legacy and choices, and the difference between power and respect. And he thought about the next 25 years. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it. It was a photo. Elena sitting on a beach somewhere, sunset in the background. She was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile he hadn't seen in years. Below the photo, a message. I'm free now. I hope someday you understand why I had to do this. Take care of yourself, Dante. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he deleted it, put the phone down. And when Park came back into the room, he said the only thing left to say, "Where do I sign?" The paperwork took 2 hours, page after page of legal language that all amounted to the same thing. He was admitting guilt, agreeing to cooperate, trading his freedom for a slightly shorter prison sentence. Hirsch walked him through each section, explained what he was agreeing to, what he was giving up. Dante signed everything without reading it. When it was done, Park collected the documents and stood. "We'll need you to start giving statements tomorrow. 9 a.m. Bring whatever records you still have access to." "I don't have access to anything anymore," Dante said. "You froze all my accounts, seized my properties. I can't even get into my own office." "Then you'll have to work from memory. We need names, locations, details on every operation you ran. That's going to take weeks. Then you better get started." Park picked up her briefcase. "And Mr. Bianchi? Don't even think about running. You're out on supervised release until sentencing. Ankle monitor goes on tonight. Curfew is 8 p.m. You violate any condition, the deal's void, and you go straight to pretrial detention." She left. Rhea stayed behind. She pulled out a small electronic device. "Let's get this fitted." The ankle monitor was heavier than it looked, cold against his skin. She fastened it above his left ankle and activated it with a handheld scanner. "This tracks your location 24/7, she said. "You're allowed to travel between your residence and your lawyer's office. Anywhere else requires prior approval. Understood?" "Yeah." "Good. Someone will be by your house at 8 p.m. to verify you're in compliance." She left him sitting there with a piece of metal locked around his ankle and a stack of papers that detailed how he'd just agreed to dismantle everything he'd spent 15 years building. Hirsch drove him home. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? When they pulled up to the estate, there was a for sale sign on the lawn. "Elena's attorney moved fast," Hirsch said. "Apparently. You have somewhere else to go once this place sells?" Dante looked at the house. The mansion he'd bought to prove he'd made it. 10 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a pool he'd never used, gardens Elena had planted and maintained while he was too busy to notice. "I'll figure something out," he said. He got out of the car and walked to the front door. The key still worked. Inside, everything was exactly as the FBI had left it. Furniture slightly out of place. Empty spaces where they'd taken things for evidence. He went upstairs to the bedroom and lay down on the bed that was too big for one person. The ceiling fan turned slowly above him. His phone buzzed. "Marco." "You sign?" Marco asked. "Yeah." "What happens now?" "Now I tell them everything. Everyone. Every operation we ever ran." Marco was quiet for a long moment. "You're ratting." "I'm surviving." "That's the same thing." "Then yeah, I'm ratting." "Jesus, Dante, do you know what this means for all of us?" "It means lawyer up. Cut whatever deal you can, because I'm not going down alone." "You son of a—" Dante hung up. He deleted Marco's number, then Victor's, then everyone else in his contacts who'd been part of the organization. All of them would hate him soon enough. All of them would be cutting their own deals, giving their own statements, trying to save themselves from the machine Elena had set in motion. He thought about calling Sophia, just to see if she'd answer, but he already knew she wouldn't. That life was over. The phones, the mistresses, the late nights and expensive dinners, and the illusion that power made him important. All of it gone. At 8 p.m., there was a knock on the door. A federal officer checking his ankle monitor, verifying he was where he was supposed to be. Dante showed him the device. The officer scanned it and left. This was his life now. Check-ins and monitoring, statements and testimony, trading names for years, cooperating his way through what was left of his existence. He went back upstairs and opened his laptop one more time. Elena's files were still there. He scrolled through them slowly, looking at the evidence of his own destruction. And then he found something he'd missed before. A video file, dated 3 years ago, right around the time she must have started documenting everything. He clicked it. The video was shaky at first, like she'd propped the camera up on something unstable. Then it steadied. Elena's face filled the screen. She looked tired. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "I don't know if anyone will ever see this," she said to the camera, "but I need to say it out loud. I need to hear myself say it." She took a breath. "I loved you, Dante. I really did. When we got married, I thought we'd build something together. A real life. Maybe kids. Maybe just a partnership. Something that mattered." She wiped her eyes. "But you didn't want a partner. You wanted someone to keep your house clean and smile at your friends and stay out of the way while you did whatever you wanted. And I tried to be okay with that. I really tried. But then I started noticing things, hearing things, and I realized what you were doing, what you really were." Her voice got stronger. "I asked you to stop. Do you remember that? I asked you to walk away, to build something legitimate. You laughed, said I didn't understand how the world worked, that I was naive." She leaned closer to the camera. "So I decided to understand. I started paying attention, really paying attention, and I learned everything, every detail of your operation, every crime, every deal, every lie." She paused. "I'm going to take all of it, every piece of evidence, and I'm going to use it to make sure you can never hurt anyone again. Not me, not the people you've destroyed with your drugs, not anyone." Her expression softened slightly. "I don't hate you, Dante. I'm just done being invisible." The video ended. Dante closed the laptop, sat in the darkness of his bedroom, and finally understood that Elena hadn't just destroyed his empire. She'd made him see exactly what he'd thrown away. He watched the video 3 more times before he could make himself stop. Each time, Elena's words hit harder. Each time, he saw something new in her expression. The exhaustion, the determination, the sadness underneath it all. She hadn't wanted to destroy him. She'd just wanted him to see her. And by the time he finally did, it was too late. Dante closed the laptop and looked around the bedroom. Their bedroom. Though it had stopped being theirs years ago, it had become his room, his space, while Elena occupied some other corner of the house he barely noticed. He couldn't remember the last time they'd slept in the same bed, couldn't remember the last real conversation they'd had, couldn't remember when she'd stopped trying to reach him and started documenting his crimes instead. The alarm on his phone went off at 7 a.m. He'd barely slept, just lay there in the dark, thinking about everything he'd lost and how completely he deserved to lose it. He showered, dressed in a suit that suddenly felt too expensive for what his life had become, and drove to Hirsch's office. The ankle monitor pressed against his skin with every step, a constant reminder of how far he'd fallen. Hirsch was waiting in the conference room with coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. "Park's team will be here at 9, he said. "We're starting with the drug distribution network. They want names, addresses, how the operations worked, everything." "I know. Dante, this is important. You need to be completely honest, no holding back. They already know most of it from Elena's files. If they catch you lying or omitting anything, the deal's void." "I said I know." Hirsch studied him for a moment. "You look like hell." "Yeah, well." The door opened and Park walked in with Reyes and another agent Dante hadn't met. They set up recording equipment on the table. 2 cameras, multiple audio recorders. Everything designed to capture his confession in excruciating detail. Park sat down across from him. "Ready to begin?" Dante nodded. "For the record, please state your name." "Dante Michael Bianchi. And you understand you're here voluntarily to provide testimony as part of your cooperation agreement?" "Yes." "Good. Let's start with your drug distribution network. How did it operate?" And just like that, Dante began dismantling everything he'd built. He talked for 6 hours straight, described the supply chain from beginning to end, named his contacts in Mexico who provided the product, detailed how it came across the border hidden in legitimate shipments, explained the distribution system that moved it through the city to dealers and users. Every name, every location, every method. Park took notes. asked clarifying questions, cross-referenced his statements with Elena's evidence. Your wife recorded a conversation on March 14th, 2023, Park said, pulling up a transcript. You were discussing a shipment with someone named Carlos. Who is Carlos? Carlos Mendoza, my primary supplier in Sinaloa. How long have you worked with him? 8 years. How much product have you moved through him? Dante did the math in his head. Probably 2,000 kilos. Maybe more. Park made a note. We'll need everything you have on Mendoza. Phone numbers, addresses, meeting locations. I can give you what I remember. That'll be a start. They broke for lunch at 2 p.m. Dante sat alone in a break room eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. Through the window, he could see people walking past on the street below. Normal people with normal problems. He wondered what Elena was doing right now. If she was having lunch somewhere sunny and peaceful, if she ever thought about him. Probably not. Why would she? She'd spent 3 years planning her escape. By the time she walked out, she'd already grieved the marriage, already moved on. He was the only one still stuck in the past. Hirsch came in and sat down across from him. You're doing well. Keep it up. Does it matter? It matters for sentencing. The more you give them, the better your recommendation. I'm still going to prison for 25 years. Or 15 with good behavior. That's a decade of your life, Dante. That's worth fighting for. Dante took a bite of his sandwich, chewed, swallowed. Did you ever meet Elena before all this? Hirsch nodded. A few times. At firm events? She seemed nice, quiet. That's what everyone thought, that she was quiet, shy, just the wife. Dante set the sandwich down. She wasn't any of those things. She was paying attention the whole time, learning, waiting. She was smart. She was smarter than me. That's the part I can't get past. I thought I was this mastermind, building an empire, staying ahead of law enforcement. But she saw through all of it, saw what it really was. What was it? A house of cards, just waiting for someone to blow on it. They went back to the conference room and started again. This time, Park wanted to know about the money laundering, how he moved cash through legitimate businesses, how he set up offshore accounts, how he'd managed to hide nearly $200 million from the IRS. Dante walked her through it step by step. The construction company his father had left him, the real estate holdings, the car dealerships and restaurants and nightclubs that existed primarily to wash dirty money. Your wife's evidence shows you used Bianchi Construction as your primary laundering vehicle, Park said. How did that work? Inflated contracts, phantom employees, material costs that were triple what we actually paid. Every job we did was padded with cash from drug sales, made it look legitimate. Who else knew about this? My accountant, Gerald Moss. My construction manager, Frank Delacroix. A few others. Are they still cooperating with the business? I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone since I signed the deal. Park made another note. We'll need to bring them in. The testimony went on, hours turning into days, each session peeling back another layer of his operation, each name he gave leading to more arrests, more raids, more people whose lives he'd just destroyed. By the end of the week, he'd given them 43 names, 19 locations, details on operations in 6 different states. He'd become exactly what he'd always despised, a rat, an informant, someone who traded loyalty for survival. But what choice did he have? Elena had already given them everything. He was just filling in the gaps. On Friday afternoon, Park closed her notepad and looked at him. That's enough for today. We'll resume Monday, same time. Dante stood. His back ached from sitting in the same chair for 8 hours. The ankle monitor had rubbed his skin raw. Hirsch walked him out to the parking garage. You did good this week. Park's pleased with your cooperation. Great. I mean it, Dante. You keep this up, I can probably get the sentencing recommendation down to 20 years. Still 2 decades. Better than life. Dante got in his car and drove home. The for sale sign was still on the lawn. According to his lawyer, Elena's attorney had already fielded 6 offers. The house would be gone within a month. He'd need to find an apartment. Something small, cheap. The kind of place he'd never imagined living in when he was on top. Inside, the house was silent. No Elena cooking dinner, no sound of her moving through rooms, just emptiness that echoed every footstep. He went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was mostly empty. He'd been living on takeout and whatever didn't require actual cooking. Elena had always handled meals. He'd never learned, never thought he'd need to. He grabbed a beer and went out to the patio. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garden Elena had planted was starting to overgrow, weeds creeping in between the flowers, plants that needed trimming. She'd spent hours out here. He remembered watching her sometimes through the window, kneeling in the dirt, completely absorbed in her work. He'd never asked what she was planting, never offered to help, just watched for a moment and then went back to whatever he'd been doing. Phone calls, emails, the endless maintenance of an empire that was always one mistake away from collapse. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something made him pick up. Hello? Dante? A woman's voice, familiar but different. It's Sophia. He hadn't expected to hear from her again. What do you want? I heard about the deal, that you're cooperating. You heard right. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. Dante took a drink of his beer. Don't be. You did what made sense. Still, we were together for 2 years. I should have what? Stuck around while I went to prison? Come on, Sophia, we both know what this was. She was quiet for a moment. I did care about you, in my way. Your way involved an apartment I paid for and a credit card with no limit. That's not caring. That's a transaction. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You were there for the money and the lifestyle. The second both disappeared, so did you. I'm not mad about it. I'm just saying we should call it what it was. What was it then? A distraction. Something to make me feel important, desired. All the things I wasn't getting at home because I'd stopped trying. Sophia sighed. Elena really did a number on you, didn't she? No, I did a number on myself. Elena just made me see it. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Dante. Yeah, me too. He hung up and finished his beer, went inside and stood in the living room that Elena had decorated. Furniture she'd chosen. Art she'd hung on the walls. Every detail carefully considered to make this place feel like a home. He'd never appreciated any of it, just walked through it like a hotel. A place to sleep between the real business of his life. Now it was all being taken away and he couldn't even be angry about it because he'd earned this. Every bit of it. The weekend passed in a blur of silence and regret. He avoided the news, avoided social media, avoided anything that would show him what people were saying about him. He knew without looking. Criminal, traitor, rat, all accurate. Monday morning came too soon. He was back in Hirsch's conference room by 8:45, drinking coffee that was too bitter and waiting for Park's team to arrive. When they did, Park had a different energy, sharper, more focused. We need to talk about the murders, she said without preamble. Dante's stomach dropped. What murders? Don't play games. Your wife's evidence includes conversations about at least 3 contracted killings. We need details. He looked at Hirsch. The lawyer nodded slightly. This was the moment he'd been dreading, the line he'd never wanted to cross. I never killed anyone, Dante said. But you ordered it done. That's different. Not to a jury. Park opened a file. March 2021. Daniel Cortez. Shot 3 times outside his home in front of his wife. Your wife recorded you telling Victor to handle the Cortez problem. What did that mean? Dante closed his eyes. Cortez had been skimming, stealing from shipments. It couldn't stand. It meant exactly what you think it meant. Say it clearly, for the record. I told Victor to kill him, to make an example. And did he? Yes. Park made a note. Who pulled the trigger? I don't know. Victor hired someone, kept it separate from me. But you paid for it? Yes. How much? $50,000. The number hung in the air. $50,000 to end a life, to leave a woman widowed, to destroy a family. Park moved to the next file. August 2022, Marcus Williams, found in the river with his throat cut. What happened there? Williams was talking to a reporter, threatening to expose the operation. So you had him killed. I told Marco to make it go away. He took care of it. Same question. Who actually did it? I don't know. You don't know, or you won't say? I don't know. That was the point. Plausible deniability. Park's expression didn't change. Third case, December 2022, Anthony Russo, car accident on Highway 101. Brake line cut. You want to tell me about that one? Dante remembered Russo, a driver who'd gotten picked up on a DUI and was looking at serious time, had started making noise about cooperating to reduce his sentence. Same thing, Dante said. I gave the order. Someone else handled it. Do you feel any remorse for these deaths? The question caught him off guard. He looked at Park, at her steady, unflinching gaze. Did he? I don't know, Whit, he said honestly. I didn't think about it much at the time. They were problems. I solved them. That's how I saw it. And now? Now I see they were people, with families, lives, and I took that away because it was convenient. That's not remorse. That's recognition. Maybe that's all I have. Park closed the file. We'll need everything you can give us on these cases. Names of anyone involved, how the contracts were arranged, where the money came from, all of it. Dante spent the next 4 hours describing the mechanics of murder, how he'd insulated himself, how payments were made, how the bodies were disposed of. It was the ugliest testimony yet. By the time they finished, he felt physically sick. Hirsch drove him home again. Neither of them spoke until they pulled up to the house. You okay? The lawyer asked. No. It gets easier. Does it? No, Hirsch admitted, but you learn to live with it. Dante got out of the car and went inside. He made it as far as the downstairs bathroom before he threw up, knelt on the cold tile floor and emptied his stomach until there was nothing left. When he finally stood, his reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes. Gray skin. The face of a man who'd just spent hours confessing to murder. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. I saw the news about your testimony. I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. E. Elena. She was watching, keeping tabs on how it all played out. He started to type a response, deleted it, tried again, deleted that too. What could he possibly say to her? Thank you for destroying my life? I'm sorry for making you invisible? I finally see what I lost? None of it mattered. She'd moved on. Was living somewhere safe and far away while he dismantled the empire she'd helped him see was built on blood and lies. He put the phone down and walked upstairs. Lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and thought about the 25 years ahead of him, the concrete walls and barred windows, and the endless parade of days that would all blur together until he was an old man with nothing left but regrets. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Dante continued his testimony, week after week of confessions, more names, more operations, more lives destroyed by his cooperation. His former associates started turning up in the news, arrested, charged, facing their own decisions about whether to cooperate or go to trial. Most of them cooperated. The evidence was too overwhelming. Elena had made sure of that. Marco was arrested on a Tuesday, Victor on a Thursday. By the end of the month, 19 people from his organization were in federal custody. All of them knew he'd given them up. All of them hated him for it. But they were doing the same thing, trading names for reduced sentences, everyone trying to save themselves from the machine. Dante's house sold 3 weeks before sentencing. Elena's attorney handled everything. He wasn't even allowed at the closing. He moved into a studio apartment on the east side, 400 square feet, a kitchen that was barely more than a hot plate and a mini fridge, a bathroom where the shower was so small he could barely turn around. It was all he could afford. His assets were frozen, his income gone. He was living on money Hirsch had loaned him against future legal fees. This was his life now. This tiny space, this ankle monitor, this endless waiting for the judge to decide exactly how many years he'd spend behind bars. One night, about a week before sentencing, his phone rang. A number he recognized. His mother. He hadn't talked to her since everything started, hadn't known what to say. Mom. Dante. Her voice was tired, old. I saw the news. I know. Your father would be devastated. I know that too. She was quiet for a long moment. Why did you do it? Why did you throw everything away? I didn't mean to. It just happened. One choice led to another, and before I knew it, I was in too deep to get out. You could have walked away. When? When was I supposed to walk away? After the first deal? After the 10th? After I'd already crossed so many lines there was no going back? Before Elena had to do it for you. That hurt more than it should have. She told you? She came to see me before she went to the FBI. Asked if I knew what you were doing. I told her I'd suspected, but never wanted to believe it. His mother's voice cracked slightly. She cried, Dante. Said she'd tried to save you, but you wouldn't let her. I didn't think I needed saving. That was always your problem. You thought you were smarter than everyone else. Thought you could outrun the consequences. Your father tried to teach you different, but you wouldn't listen. Dante closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix what you broke. What do I do now? You serve your time. You think about what you did. And maybe, if you're lucky, you figure out how to be better than this. I don't know if I can. Then you'll die in prison having learned nothing. Your choice. She hung up. Dante sat in his tiny apartment and realized his mother was right. He had a choice, not about prison. That was happening no matter what. But about what kind of man he'd be when he came out. If he came out. The sentencing hearing was on a Thursday morning in late November. Dante wore the same suit he'd worn to sign the plea deal. It didn't fit quite right anymore. He'd lost weight, stopped eating properly, stopped caring about things like appearance. The courtroom was packed. Reporters in the back rows, victims' families in the gallery, federal prosecutors at their table, looking satisfied and prepared. Hirsch sat beside him, reviewing notes one last time. Whatever happens, the lawyer said quietly, don't react. Stay calm. Okay. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Judge Catherine Morrison, 62 years old, known for being tough but fair. She sat. Everyone else sat. The clerk read the charges, all 47 counts, Dante's guilty plea to each one. Then Park stood to make her sentencing recommendation. Your Honor, the government recommends 25 years in federal prison to run concurrent, followed by 5 years supervised release. Mr. Bianchi has provided substantial cooperation. His testimony has already led to 19 additional arrests and the dismantling of a significant criminal organization. However, the severity of his crimes, including conspiracy to commit murder, warrants significant prison time. The judge made notes. Defense? Hirsch stood. Your Honor, my client accepts full responsibility for his actions. He has cooperated extensively with the government, provided testimony that will help bring dozens of criminals to justice. He asks the court for mercy, for a sentence that allows him the possibility of rebuilding his life. How much time are you requesting? 15 years, Your Honor. The judge looked at Dante. Mr. Bianchi, do you have anything you'd like to say? Dante stood. His legs felt unsteady. He gripped the table for support. Your Honor, I don't have any excuses for what I did. I made choices, bad choices. I hurt people, destroyed lives, all because I wanted power and money and respect. He paused. My wife tried to stop me, tried to make me see what I was becoming. I didn't listen. I dismissed her, made her invisible, and she responded by showing me exactly what I'd built. An empire of violence and crime. She was right to tear it down. I deserved everything that happened. He took a breath. I know I'm going to prison. I know I've earned that. All I can say is that I understand now what I couldn't see before. That power doesn't mean anything if you use it to destroy people. That money is worthless if you get it through blood. That respect you have to take isn't respect at all. His voice cracked slightly. I can't undo what I did. Can't bring back the people I had killed. Can't fix the families I destroyed with drugs. All I can do is accept the punishment and try to be better than I was. If I ever get the chance. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison looked at her notes, then at Dante, then at the prosecution table. I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively, she said. The crimes Mr. Bianchi committed are serious, violent, destructive to the community. 3 people are dead because of his orders. Countless more lives have been ruined by the drugs he trafficked. She paused. However, I've also reviewed his cooperation. It has been substantial, genuine. His testimony has helped dismantle an organization that has plagued this city for over a decade. That cooperation, while it doesn't excuse his crimes, does warrant consideration. Dante held his breath. Mr. Bianchi, I hereby sentence you to 20 years in federal prison to run concurrent on all counts, followed by 5 years supervised release. You'll be eligible for parole after 15 years with good behavior. You're remanded into custody immediately. The gavel came down. 20 years. 15 with good behavior. He'd be 66 when he got out. If he got out. 2 marshals approached. Dante stood and turned around, hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place. Hirsch leaned in close. I'll file the appeal. Keep your head down in there. Dante nodded. The marshals led him toward a side door. As he walked past the gallery, he saw faces he recognized, victims' families, glaring at him with expressions that mixed hatred and satisfaction. He deserved every look. The door closed behind him, and suddenly he was in a holding cell. Concrete walls. A bench. Bars. This was real now. He sat down and put his head in his hands. 20 years. 15 with good behavior. 5,475 days. And every single one of them would be spent thinking about the woman who'd loved him enough to try to save him, and who'd been strong enough to destroy him when he wouldn't save himself. The transport to federal prison happened 2 days later. Dante sat in the back of an unmarked van, shackled at the wrists and ankles, watching the city disappear through a small window reinforced with wire mesh. The streets he'd controlled, the neighborhoods where his word had been law, all of it sliding past like scenes from someone else's life. The facility was 3 hours north. Medium security, just like Park had promised. Concrete buildings surrounded by double fences topped with razor wire. Guard towers at each corner, a place designed to contain men who'd made the same kinds of mistakes Dante had, just on different scales. Processing took 4 hours. They stripped him of everything. The suit, the watch Elena had given him for their 5th anniversary. The wedding ring he'd kept wearing even after she left. All of it cataloged and boxed and stored in some warehouse he'd probably never see again. They gave him prison blues, cheap canvas that scratched against his skin, shoes that didn't quite fit, a bedroll and toiletries in a clear plastic bag. Bianche, the intake officer said, reading from a clipboard. You're in C block, cell 247. Keep your head down. Follow the rules. Don't cause problems. Okay. You got people on the inside? What? Associates, friends, people from your organization who might have a problem with you being here. Dante thought about the 19 people he'd helped put away, about Marco and Victor, and all the others whose testimony he'd traded for a shorter sentence. Probably, he said. The officer made a note. We'll keep an eye out, but you should know protective custody is for cooperators who can't safely mix with general population. That what you want? No. You sure? We got at least 3 guys in here who worked for you. They might not be happy to see you. I'll handle it. The officer shrugged. Your funeral. They led him through a series of locked doors, each one clanging shut behind him with a finality that made his chest tight. Through common areas where men in the same blue uniforms watched him pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to recognition to open hostility. C block was loud. Voices echoing off concrete. Metal doors slamming, the constant buzz of fluorescent lights that never turned off. Cell 247 was on the 2nd tier, 8 feet by 10, 2 bunks bolted to the wall, a toilet with no seat, a sink that dripped constantly, a small window near the ceiling that showed a rectangle of gray sky. His cellmate was already there, a man in his 50s with gray hair and prison tattoos covering both arms. He looked up from a paperback novel when Dante entered. You're the new guy. Yeah. I'm Ray. Been here 6 years, got 4 more to go. Dante set his bedroll on the lower bunk. Dante. Ray's eyes narrowed. Dante Bianche? The mob guy? That's me. Shit. I heard you were coming. Everyone's talking about it. Ray sat up, swung his legs over the side of the bunk. You really bring down your whole organization? I cooperated, if that's what you mean. That's exactly what I mean. You know how that plays in here, right? I can guess. Ray shook his head. Man, you better watch your back. There's guys in here who'd shank a cooperator just for the reputation. I'll be careful. Careful ain't gonna cut it. You need to be smart. Find a crew. Get protection. Otherwise you're a target. Dante looked at him. You offering? Hell no. I'm 2 years from getting out. I'm not catching a case for defending some rat. No offense. None taken. Ray went back to his book. Dante started making up his bunk with the thin mattress and scratchy blanket they'd given him. The whole time he could feel eyes on him through the cell bars. Men watching, calculating. He'd been in prison for less than 6 hours, and he already knew this was going to be harder than he'd imagined. That night, lying on his bunk in the dark, listening to Ray snore above him and the endless noise of the block around them, Dante thought about Elena. Wondered where she was sleeping, if she ever thought about him, if she felt any guilt at all for putting him here. Probably not. Why would she? He'd earned every day of this sentence, every hour in this cell, every moment of fear about whether someone would stick a sharpened piece of metal between his ribs in the shower. This was justice. Real justice. Not the kind he'd dispensed from behind a desk with a phone call and $50,000 in cash. The kind that came with consequences, with time, with the slow, grinding awareness that you destroyed your own life and there was no one to blame but yourself. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, word had spread through the entire facility. Dante Bianchi, the cooperating witness, was in C block. The man who'd traded 43 names for a reduced sentence. The rat who'd dismantled an empire to save his own skin. The first threat came in the cafeteria. A note passed to him on a food tray. Simple. Direct. Watch your back, snitch. Dante ate his meal without looking up, kept his eyes on his plate, finished and went back to his cell. The second threat was more personal. A guy named Torres cornered him in the yard. Big guy, covered in gang tattoos, eyes that said he'd killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. You Bianca? Dante turned to face him. Yeah. You put my cousin away, Ricardo Martinez. He's doing 15 because you testified. I don't know your cousin. Bullshit. You gave them names. His was one of them. I gave them 43 names. I don't remember all of them. Torres stepped closer. You think this is funny? No, I think your cousin made his own choices. Same as I made mine. Same as you made yours that put you in here. We all own our decisions. That's real philosophical for a rat. Call me whatever you want. Doesn't change the facts. Torres looked like he wanted to swing. His hands curled into fists, but there were guards watching from the tower, cameras everywhere. He'd catch a charge if he started something here. This ain't over, Torres said. I didn't think it was. Torres walked away. Dante went back to his cell and lay on his bunk, staring at the concrete ceiling, and realized he was probably going to die in here. Not today. Not this week. But eventually. Someone would catch him alone. Someone would decide the reputation boost was worth the extra time. And that would be that. 20 years turned into forever. He thought about asking for protective custody. Thought about it seriously. But something stopped him. Some stubborn part of himself that refused to hide. That said if this was his punishment, he should face it straight on. Even if it killed him. The weeks blurred together. Wake up, count, breakfast, work detail in the laundry, lunch, yard time, dinner, count, lockdown. Every day the same. Every day stretched out like years. He called Hirsch once a week. The lawyer updated him on the appeals process, which was going nowhere. Updated him on Elena's divorce, which was proceeding smoothly. She wasn't asking for anything, just wanted it finalized. She moved on, Hirsch said during one call. Started a new life somewhere. I don't know where. Federal protection has her completely hidden. Good, Dante said, and meant it. He got letters sometimes. From his mother, mostly. Short notes that said she was praying for him. That she hoped he was learning something from all this. That his father would have wanted him to be better. He never wrote back. Didn't know what to say. Marco ended up in the same facility 3 months into Dante's sentence. Different block, but they crossed paths in the yard one day. Marco saw him and stopped walking. Just stood there, staring. Dante walked over. Marco, don't talk to me. I know you're angry. Angry? Marco laughed. It sounded harsh, broken. I got 12 years because of you. My wife left me. My kids won't take my calls. And you want to talk about angry? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't give me my life back. I know. You destroyed everything. And for what? To shave a few years off your sentence? You traded all of us for nothing. I traded us for survival. Same thing you would have done. Bullshit. I would have stood up, taken my time like a man instead of crying to the feds. You saying you didn't cooperate? You saying you didn't give them names too? Marco's jaw tightened. That was different. How? Because you started it. You opened the floodgates, made it okay to talk. After that, what choice did we have? Dante didn't have an answer for that. Because Marco was right. He'd started the domino effect, made cooperation acceptable. Everyone else had just followed his lead. I hope it was worth it, Marco said. I hope those 5 years you saved were worth destroying everyone who ever trusted you. He walked away. Dante stood in the yard watching him go and felt the weight of every name he'd given, every life he'd disrupted, every family he'd helped tear apart. It hadn't been worth it, but it was done. And he had to live with that. 6 months in, Dante found a routine. Work in the laundry during the day. Yard time when they had it. Library in the evenings. He started reading. Books he'd never made time for before. History, philosophy. Fiction that took him out of this place for a few hours. He took a GED prep course even though he already had a high school diploma. Took it because it gave him something to do. Something to focus on besides the concrete walls and the constant threat of violence. He started going to the chapel on Sundays, not because he'd found religion, but because it was quiet there. Peaceful. The chaplain, an older man named Father Michaels, never pushed, never asked questions, just let Dante sit in the back pew and think. One Sunday after the service, Father Michaels approached him. "You've been coming for a while now," the chaplain said, "but you never participate, never pray." "I don't know how," Dante admitted. "It's not complicated. You just talk. Say what's on your mind." "And someone listens?" Father Michaels smiled. "That's the idea. I killed people, Father, ordered their deaths, ruined lives with drugs and violence. You think anyone's listening to me? I think someone's always listening, whether you believe that or not." Dante looked at the simple wooden cross hanging on the wall. "I don't know what I believe anymore." "That's okay. Doubt is part of the journey." "What journey? I'm in prison for 20 years. There's no journey, just time. Time is all we have. What we do with it is the journey." Dante thought about that for a long time after. Thought about what he was doing with his time, whether he was learning anything or just surviving, whether there was a difference. He started writing letters. Not to send, just to write, to Elena mostly, telling her things he'd never said when they were together. Apologies, explanations, memories of moments he'd let slip past without appreciating them. He filled notebooks with these letters, kept them hidden under his mattress. Ray never asked what he was writing, probably didn't care. A year into his sentence, Dante got word that his mother had died. Heart attack, quick and painless according to the prison counselor who delivered the news. "You can request compassionate release to attend the funeral," the counselor said. "But given your cooperation status and security concerns, it's unlikely to be approved." "Don't bother," Dante said. "I wouldn't want to go anyway." "You should consider it. Last chance to say goodbye." "I said goodbye a long time ago." He didn't go to the funeral, spent that day in his cell, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his mother and his father and the family legacy he'd destroyed, thinking about how his parents had built something decent and he'd turned it into a criminal empire that collapsed under its own weight. The guilt was crushing sometimes, heavy enough that he understood why some men in here gave up, why they stopped eating, stopped trying, just let the weight of their crimes suffocate them slowly. But he didn't give up. Couldn't. Because giving up felt like the easy way out. And he'd taken enough easy ways. This was his punishment, his penance, and he was going to serve every day of it. Victor ended up in the same facility around the 18-month mark. They didn't talk, just acknowledged each other with nods when they passed in the corridors. Two men who'd built something together and then torn it apart trying to save themselves. Torres made good on his threat eventually, caught Dante in the shower block when the guards were rotating shifts. Had a shank made from a sharpened toothbrush. "Your cousin's still inside?" Dante asked when he saw the weapon. "This ain't about my cousin anymore. This is about respect." "Respect for what? Being stupid enough to catch a murder charge for something that doesn't affect you." "You talk a lot for a dead man." Torres lunged. Dante sidestepped. Not fast enough. The shank caught him in the side. Sharp pain, hot blood. Dante grabbed Torres's wrist, twisted. They went down together, sliding on wet tile, fighting for control of the weapon. The alarm started blaring. Guards rushed in, pulled them apart. Dante was bleeding. Not bad. Shallow cut. The prison doctor stitched him up with 12 sutures and sent him back to his cell. Torres got 6 months in solitary. Dante got a lecture about staying safe and a note in his file about the incident. Ray looked at the stitches when Dante came back to the cell. Told you to watch your back. I know. You gonna request protective custody now? No. Why not? You got a death wish? Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of hiding. Ray shook his head. You're crazier than I thought. The scar from Torres's shank became a reminder. Something Dante touched sometimes when he was lying in his bunk at night. A physical mark of the consequences. Of the fact that his choices didn't just affect him. They rippled out, touched other people, created enemies in places he'd never expected. He thought about Elena's video, about her saying she wanted to make sure he could never hurt anyone again. She'd succeeded. He was locked in a cage, powerless, unable to harm anyone except himself. But she'd also freed him in a way, forced him to confront what he'd become, to sit with it, to face the truth without any distractions or escapes. 2 years in, he got a letter from an unexpected source. Sophia. The envelope was thin. No return address. He almost threw it away without reading it, but something made him open it. The letter was short. Dante, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry for how things ended. You were right about us, about what we were. I was using you for the lifestyle and the money and the feeling of being important. When that was gone, I ran. I'm not proud of that. I've spent the last 2 years thinking about it, about how I was part of the problem. I enabled you, helped you avoid facing what was happening at home, made it easier for you to ignore your wife. I heard she's doing well, that she started over somewhere. I'm glad for her. She deserved better than what we both gave her. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What we did. What I was. I hope you're finding some kind of peace in there. Sophia Dante read this letter 3 times. Then he put it in the box under his bunk with all the letters he'd written to Elena. Evidence of people trying to make amends for things that couldn't be undone. He thought about writing back, but what would he say? That he forgave her? He wasn't even sure he forgave himself yet. So he didn't write back, just filed the letter away with the others and went on with his routine. Work, meals, yard, library, chapel, every day the same. Every day a small step towards something he couldn't quite name yet. 3 years in, Dante got called to the warden's office. Unusual. Inmates didn't typically have face-to-face meetings with the warden unless something serious had happened. Warden Phillips was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, former corrections officer who'd worked her way up. She gestured for Dante to sit. You've been keeping clean, she said, looking at a file on her desk. No incidents since the Torres situation. Good work reviews, participating in programs. I try. That's more than most do. She closed the file. I got a request from the Victim Services Coordinator. Family of Daniel Cortez wants to participate in a restorative justice session. You know what that is? Dante's stomach dropped. Cortez, the man he'd ordered killed back in 2021, the first name on his murder confession. I know what it is. They want to meet with you, talk about what happened, how it affected them. It's completely voluntary. You can say no. Why would they want to meet me? That's something you'd have to ask them. But in my experience, victims' families usually want answers, want to understand why. Restorative justice gives them that opportunity. Dante thought about Mrs. Cortez, about watching her husband die on their front lawn, about the years since then living with that trauma, that grief. When? He asked. 2 weeks. You have time to think about it. I don't need time. I'll do it. Phillips looked surprised. You're sure? These sessions can be intense, emotional. I'm sure. All right, I'll let the coordinator know. The 2 weeks passed slowly. Dante tried to prepare. Read materials about restorative justice, practiced what he might say, how he might explain the inexplicable. But when the day came, sitting in a small conference room across from Maria Cortez and her 2 adult children, all his preparation evaporated. Mrs. Cortez was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, eyes that held a sadness so deep it was almost physical. Thank you for agreeing to this, she said quietly. I should be thanking you, Dante replied. You didn't have to come here, didn't have to look at me. I needed to. For 3 years I've been trying to understand. Why Daniel? What did he do that was so terrible he deserved to die in front of me? Dante felt his throat tighten. He didn't deserve it. He didn't do anything that justified what I did. Then why? He was stealing from me, from the operation. And I couldn't let that stand. Couldn't let people think they could take from me without consequences. He paused. I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm just telling you the truth. So my husband died over money. Yes. Mrs. Cortez's hands trembled slightly. Her son reached over and held one of them. Do you know what it was like? She asked. Watching him die, holding him while he bled out on our driveway, calling for help that came too late? No, I don't. Do you know what it's like to sleep alone for 3 years after 40 years of marriage? To wake up every morning and remember all over again that he's gone? No. Do you have any idea what you took from us? Dante looked at her children, at the grief written across all their faces. I know I took everything, he said quietly. I know I destroyed your family. I know no amount of time I serve will ever balance what I did. I know sorry is meaningless coming from me, but I am sorry, for whatever that's worth. Mrs. Cortez wiped her eyes. It's not worth much, but I needed to hear you say it, needed to look you in the eye and know you understood. I understand. Do you? Do you really? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? I understand, Dante repeated. Not because I've experienced what you have, but because I've had 3 years to think about the people I hurt, the lives I destroyed. Yours is just one. But it matters. It all matters. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Mrs. Cortez's daughter spoke. What happened to the person who actually killed our father? I don't know, Dante said. I never knew who pulled the trigger. I just gave the order and let someone else handle the details. That's convenient. It's the truth. I insulated myself, made sure I could deny knowledge. It's how I operated. So the person who murdered our father is out there somewhere. Free. Maybe. Or maybe they're dead. Or in prison for something else. I don't know. The daughter looked disgusted. You ordered someone killed and you don't even know who did it. That's right. How many others? Mrs. Cortez asked. How many other people did you have killed? 3 that I ordered directly. More that I knew about but didn't stop. 3 families like mine. Yes. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. I came here hoping to find some kind of peace, some kind of closure. But looking at you, all I feel is anger and sadness. Because you're just a man, an ordinary man who made terrible choices. And those choices destroyed my life. I know. You'll get out someday. In 15 years, maybe less. You'll walk out of here and get to have a life again. Daniel never gets that. I never get that. We're serving a life sentence for your crime. Dante didn't have a response to that, because she was right, completely, devastatingly right. The session ended shortly after. Mrs. Cortez and her children left without saying goodbye. Dante sat in the conference room alone for a while after they'd gone, thinking about Daniel Cortez, about the fact that he'd been a real person with a real life and a real family who loved him. Not just a problem to be solved, not just a name on a list, a person. And Dante had erased him with a phone call and $50,000 and never thought about him again until the FBI came knocking. That night, lying in his cell, Dante cried for the first time since being sentenced. Actually cried. For Mrs. Cortez and her children. For Daniel. For all the people he'd hurt in pursuit of power that meant nothing. Ray heard him, but didn't say anything. Just let him cry. The next morning, Dante requested a meeting with the prison counselor. Started talking about the restorative justice session. About the guilt. About not knowing how to carry all of it. The counselor listened, didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. Just listened and then said, guilt means you have a conscience. What you do with that conscience is up to you. Dante thought about that. About what he could do with 15 more years in prison. Whether there was some way to make any of this mean something. He started volunteering in the prison literacy program, teaching other inmates to read, helping them study for their GEDs. It wasn't much. Didn't come close to balancing the scales, but it was something productive, something that helped instead of hurt. He kept writing letters to Elena, telling her about the restorative justice session, about Mrs. Cortez, about how he was trying to be better, even though better felt impossible. He never sent them, just filled notebook after notebook with words she'd never read. It was therapeutic, a way to process everything without having to explain it to anyone else. 4 years into his sentence, Dante got news that the divorce was finalized. Elena had signed the papers. He signed his copy. After 8 years of marriage and 4 years of separation, it was officially over. He felt nothing, just a distant acknowledgement that another chapter had closed. That night, he pulled out all the letters he'd written to Elena. Read through them. 4 years of confessions and apologies and attempts to explain the inexplicable. Then he burned them. Not out of anger, just because they didn't serve a purpose anymore. They were relics of a man trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Elena had moved on, built a new life. She didn't need his letters or his explanations or his guilt. She was free, and maybe that was the only thing that mattered. The ashes from Elena's letters sat in a small pile on the corner of his bunk. Dante stared at them for a long time before brushing them into the toilet and flushing them away. 4 years of words disappearing in seconds. Maybe that was fitting. Maybe that was the point. Ray climbed down from his bunk and looked at the empty notebooks stacked on Dante's shelf. "You finally getting rid of those?" "Already did." "What were they anyway?" "Never asked. Letters I never sent. To someone who doesn't want to hear from me. Your wife. Ex-wife now. Divorce finalized yesterday." Ray sat on the edge of his bunk. "That's rough. How long were you married?" 8 years, though I wasn't really present for most of them." "That why she left?" "That's part of it. The other part is I was a criminal who ordered people killed, and she decided to stop me the only way that would work. By burning down your whole life." "Yeah." Ray was quiet for a moment. "You ever regret it? The life you had before?" Dante thought about the question, about the money and the power and the feeling of being untouchable. About late nights at expensive restaurants and people who jumped when he called, and the illusion that he mattered. "No," he said finally, "I regret what I did to get there. But the life itself? It was empty. I just didn't see it until it was gone. Most guys in here would kill to have what you had. Most guys in here are idiots, including me." Ray laughed. It was the first time Dante had heard him laugh in 4 years. Can't argue with that. The years continued their slow march. 5 became 6. 6 became 7. Dante settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like something approaching purpose. He taught literacy classes 3 times a week, started a book club for inmates who wanted to discuss what they were reading, volunteered in the chaplain's office, organizing donation drives and coordinating visits. He wasn't trying to redeem himself. Redemption felt too large, too ambitious. He was just trying to be useful, to give back something small in exchange for everything he'd taken. Father Michaels noticed the change, mentioned it one Sunday after service. "You're different than when you first got here," the chaplain said. "How so?" "Less defensive, less angry. You found something to hold on to." "I don't know about that. I'm just trying to get through each day without making things worse. That's more than most people manage. In here or outside?" Dante thought about Mrs. Cortez, about the restorative justice session that still haunted him 3 years later. "Do you think people can actually change? Or are we just who we've always been, waiting for the right circumstances to show it?" Father Michaels considered the question. "I think people can change. But it requires recognizing who they were and choosing to be different. Most people never do that hard work. They just keep making the same mistakes with different variables. And if you recognize it but can't fix what you broke, then you spend the rest of your life being better than you were. That's all any of us can do." Around the 7-year mark, Dante got word that Victor had been released. Good behavior. Early parole. He was out after serving just under 6 years of his 12-year sentence. Dante felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that his old friend was free. Envy that he still had 8 years minimum before he'd even be eligible for parole. Guilt that Victor had been here at all because of testimony Dante had provided. A month later, he got a letter. Victor's handwriting on the envelope. He almost didn't open it. Didn't know if he could handle whatever was inside. But eventually, curiosity won. The letter was short, direct, very Victor. "Dante, I got out last month, staying with my sister in Ohio until I figure out what's next. They got me working construction. It's honest work, hard, nothing like before. I don't forgive you for what you did, for giving them my name, for the years I lost. But I also know I made my own choices. I knew what we were doing was wrong, and I did it anyway. So I guess we both own this. Someone told me you're teaching classes in there, helping people. I don't know if that makes up for anything. Probably doesn't, but it's something. I hope you figure out who you want to be when you get out. Because the person you were before, that guy's gone. Prison killed him. What comes next is up to you. Take care of yourself. V. Dante read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the box where Elena's letters used to be. It was the closest thing to forgiveness he was likely to get from anyone he'd betrayed. It wasn't much, but it meant something. He wrote back, kept it simple. Told Victor he was glad he was out, that he hoped Ohio was treating him well, that construction was good work. He didn't apologize again. They were past that, just acknowledged where they were and wished each other well. Victor wrote back occasionally over the next year. Updates about his life, his niece's graduation, his sister's cooking. Small details of a normal existence that felt impossibly far away from where Dante was. But the letters reminded him that there was a world outside these walls, that people moved on, built new lives, found ways to survive after everything fell apart. 8 years in, Ray got released, completed his full sentence, and walked out a free man. Dante helped him pack his few possessions, shook his hand at the cell door. "You gonna be all right in here alone?" Ray asked. "I'll manage. Been alone before." "Yeah, but you get used to having someone around. Even someone as annoying as me." "You weren't that annoying." "Liar," Ray smiled. "You got 7 more years minimum. That's a long time." "I know." "Make them count. Don't just survive. Actually do something." "I'm trying." "Try harder." Ray left. The cell felt enormous without him. Dante lay on his bunk that night, staring at the empty space above him, and felt the weight of 7 more years pressing down on his chest. 7 years minimum. More likely 10 or 12 before he actually walked out. He'd be 60 when he got out. An old man with a record. No money. No connections. No prospects. What did you do with that? How did you build a life from nothing when you were 60 and everything you'd ever been was criminal? He didn't have answers. Just the slow accumulation of days and the hope that something would make sense eventually. Around year 9, Dante got a new cellmate. A kid named Danny. 23 years old. In for armed robbery. First offense, but he'd shot a clerk during the robbery, so he was looking at serious time. Danny was angry. At the world. At himself. At everyone who'd put him in this situation. Dante recognized the anger. Remembered feeling it himself in the early days. Before the weight of consequences settled in and crushed the defiance out of him. "How long you in for?" Danny asked on his first night. 20 years. Down to about 6 now, with good behavior." "Jesus, what'd you do?" "Everything. Racketeering, drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. Take your pick." "You killed someone?" "I ordered it done." "That's the same thing legally." Danny was quiet for a moment. "You regret it?" "Every day." "But you did it anyway." "Yeah, I thought I was building something. Thought I was powerful. Turns out I was just scared and stupid and hiding behind money and violence." "So what changed?" "My wife took everything from me, gave all the evidence to the FBI, walked away and let me face what I'd done. That changed things." "She sounds like a bitch." "She was the smartest person I ever knew. I just didn't realize it until she destroyed me." Danny didn't understand. Dante could see it in his face. The kid was still in the anger phase, still blaming everyone else, still convinced he'd been wronged by the universe. It would take time for him to see it differently, if he ever did. Over the next year, Dante watched Danny navigate the same path he'd walked. The threats, the violence, the constant calculation of who to trust and who to avoid. He tried to help where he could, gave advice, intervened when Danny was about to do something stupid, protected him from situations that would have gotten him hurt. Danny didn't always appreciate it. Sometimes he lashed out, told Dante to mind his own business, called him old and washed up and irrelevant. Dante took it because he remembered being that angry, that lost, and because someone needed to care about this kid, even if he didn't care about himself. 10 years into his sentence, Dante turned 56 in prison. No celebration, no acknowledgement, just another day in an endless series of days. Father Michaels brought him a cupcake from the commissary, a small gesture that somehow meant everything. You're more than halfway there, the chaplain said. 5 more years and you're eligible for parole. Assuming I get it. You will. Your record in here is spotless. You've done everything right. Doesn't change what I did outside. No. But it shows you're capable of change. That matters. Dante ate the cupcake slowly. It was too sweet, the frosting artificial, but it was the kindest thing anyone had done for him in a decade. Do you ever wonder what happens to people like me? He asked, when we get out. All the time. And some of them make it, find jobs, rebuild, stay clean. Others fall back into old patterns, end up back inside within a year. Father Michaels paused. The difference is usually whether they have something to live for outside these walls. I don't have anything. Then you better find something. 5 years goes faster than you think. Dante thought about that conversation for weeks after, about what he had to live for, about what would be waiting for him when he finally walked out of here. No family. His mother was dead. His father long gone. No wife. No friends. No money. No home. Just a criminal record and a body that was starting to show its age. What did you do with that? The answer came slowly, not in a moment of revelation, but in the quiet accumulation of purpose he'd found teaching and helping and trying to be useful. You did what you could with what you had. You helped where you were able. You tried to leave things better than you found them. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. 11 years in, Danny got into a fight in the yard. Bad one. Put another inmate in the infirmary with a fractured skull. Earned himself 3 years in solitary and additional charges that extended his sentence by 5 years. Dante visited him when he came out of solitary. Danny looked different, thinner, harder. The anger had calcified into something cold. You should have listened to me, Dante said. About what? About everything. About keeping your head down. About not letting pride run your life. Yeah, well, too late now. It's never too late. You're 26. You got your whole life ahead of you. I got 13 more years. That's what I got. Then make them count. Learn something. Be something other than angry. Danny looked at him with empty eyes. You sound like a preacher. I sound like someone who wasted 15 years building an empire that collapsed in a week. Who destroyed everyone who trusted him. Who traded everything for nothing. Dante leaned forward. You want to end up like me? 60 years old with nothing but regrets? Keep doing what you're doing. Maybe that's all there is. Maybe some of us are just meant to be here. That's bullshit, and you know it. You made choices. You can make different ones. But Danny didn't want to hear it. He was too far gone. Too committed to the narrative that the world had wronged him. Dante recognized the futility. You couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. He'd learned that with himself, with his organization, with every person who'd gone down because they couldn't see past their own pride. All you could do was offer a hand and accept when it was refused. 12 years in, Dante got news that changed everything. Hirsch called. His voice sounded strained, tired. I got something you need to hear, the lawyer said. What? Elena's coming forward. She wants to speak at your parole hearing. Dante's heart stopped. What? She contacted the parole board. Said she wants to provide testimony, for or against, I don't know yet. But she's coming. Why would she do that? I don't know. Maybe she wants to make sure you stay inside. Maybe she wants to help. I can't read her mind. When is this happening? Your hearing is in 3 years. She'll be notified when it's scheduled. 3 years? 3 more years, and he'd see Elena again for the first time since she'd walked out of their house 14 years ago. The thought terrified him. What would she look like? What would she say? Would she stand before the board and detail every crime he'd committed, or would she do something unexpected? He had no idea, and no way to know until it happened. The 3 years passed both impossibly slow and terrifyingly fast. Dante continued his routine, teaching, helping, trying to be better than he'd been. But underneath it all was the constant awareness that Elena was out there, living her life, preparing to face him again. He thought about trying to contact her, to ask what she planned to say, but Hirsch advised against it. Let her come to you, the lawyer said. Don't muddy the waters by reaching out. So Dante waited, counted down the days, wondered what 14 years had done to the woman who'd destroyed his life to save her own. The parole hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in March. Dante woke that morning with his stomach in knots. He'd been in prison for 15 years. This was his first shot at getting out. The hearing room was small. A panel of 3 parole board members sat at a table. Dante sat across from them in his prison blues with Hirsch beside him. The chairwoman, a stern-looking woman named Patterson, reviewed his file. Mr. Bianchi, you've served 15 years of a 20-year sentence. Your record while incarcerated has been exemplary. No infractions. Extensive participation in rehabilitation programs. Testimony from prison staff indicates you've been a model inmate. Thank you, Dante said. However, the severity of your original crimes is significant. 3 conspiracy to commit murder charges, extensive drug trafficking, money laundering. These are not minor offenses. I understand. We've received testimony from several parties, including your ex-wife, Elena Bianchi. She's requested to speak today. Is that acceptable to you? Dante's mouth went dry. Yes. Patterson nodded to someone behind Dante. A door opened, and Elena walked in. She looked the same, but different. Older, like him. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her hair was shorter, professional. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry except small earrings. She didn't look at Dante as she took the seat reserved for witnesses. Patterson addressed her. Mrs. Bianchi, thank you for coming. You've submitted written testimony, but requested to speak in person. Please proceed. Elena folded her hands in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak, just sat there, gathering herself. Then she looked up. Looked directly at Dante for the first time in 14 years. Her eyes were calm, clear. No anger, no fear, just a steady assessment that made him feel completely transparent. I spent 3 years documenting my ex-husband's crimes, she began. Her voice was quiet, but firm. 3 years learning every detail of his operation so I could give law enforcement everything they needed to put him away. I did it because I saw what he'd become, what his choices were doing to other people. And I knew he wouldn't stop unless someone stopped him. She paused. I don't regret that decision. I'd do it again. But I also need to say something I couldn't say 14 years ago when I was scared and angry and hurt. She looked at the parole board. Dante Bianchi is not the same man he was when I left him. I followed his case, read the reports, spoken to people who work with him in the prison. He spent 15 years trying to be better than he was. That doesn't erase what he did, doesn't bring back the people he had killed, doesn't undo the damage of the drugs he sold. But it means something. Elena looked back at Dante. You taught me about power, she said, about leverage and control and survival. I used those lessons against you, turned everything you built into evidence that destroyed you. And I'd do it again because you needed to be stopped. Her voice softened slightly. But I also spent 8 years married to you. I knew the person you were before the power consumed you. I saw glimpses of that person in quiet moments. And I think that person is still in there, buried under years of bad choices, but still there. She turned back to the board. I'm not asking you to release him. That's your decision. But I want you to know that I don't hate him. I don't fear him. I just want him to live the rest of his life doing something better than what he did. If he can do that outside these walls, then maybe 15 years is enough. If he can't, then keep him here until he can. She stood. That's all I wanted to say. Patterson thanked her. Elena walked toward the door. As she passed Dante's chair, she stopped, looked down at him. I'm glad you're still alive, she said quietly. I was worried Torres might actually kill you. You knew about that? I know about everything. I've been watching. She paused. The literacy program is good work. Keep doing it. Then she was gone. Dante sat in stunned silence. She'd been watching, all these years, keeping tabs on what he was doing, how he was surviving. Why? The question burned in his mind, but there was no time to process it. The hearing continued. Questions from the board, testimony from prison staff, Hirsch's argument for release. It lasted 2 hours. At the end, Patterson looked at Dante. Do you have anything you'd like to say before we deliberate? Dante stood. His legs felt unsteady. I don't deserve to be released, he said. I know that. I destroyed lives, ordered people killed, flooded communities with drugs that ruined families. No amount of time I serve will balance that. He took a breath. But I've spent 15 years trying to understand what I did, why I did it. And I've learned that everything I thought mattered, the power, the money, the respect, it was all empty. built on violence and fear. It meant nothing. He looked at each board member. My ex-wife was right about everything. I needed to be stopped. I needed to face consequences. And I needed to learn what it means to actually be useful instead of just powerful. He paused. If you release me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was. Teaching, helping, giving back some fraction of what I took. If you keep me here, I'll do the same thing behind these walls. Either way, the man who ran that criminal empire is dead. He died the day my wife walked out. What's left is just someone trying to make amends that can never be enough. He sat down. The board deliberated for 30 minutes. Dante waited in a holding room with Hirsch. You did well, the lawyer said. Doesn't matter. They'll keep me inside. Maybe, maybe not. Elena's testimony carried weight. Why did she do that? Why come here after all this time? Because she's moved on. She's free. And maybe she wants you to have a chance at being free too. When they called Dante back in, Patterson's expression was unreadable. Mr. Bianchi, after careful consideration, this board has decided to grant parole with conditions. You'll be released in 30 days. You'll serve 5 years of supervised release. You'll participate in mandatory counseling. You'll maintain employment. You'll have no contact with any of your former associates. Any violation of these conditions will result in immediate revocation and return to custody. Dante couldn't breathe. Parole after 15 years. He was getting out. Do you understand these conditions? Patterson asked. Yes. Then we're adjourned. The gavel came down. Hirsch grabbed his hand, shook it hard. You did it. You're getting out. Dante nodded, couldn't speak. The enormity of it was too much. After 15 years in a concrete box, he was going to be free. The 30 days passed in a blur. Dante processed out, said goodbye to the people he'd taught, to Father Michaels, to the few inmates he'd grown to respect. Danny refused to see him. Still angry, still lost. Dante hoped the kid would figure it out eventually, but he couldn't wait around to find out. On the day of his release, Dante walked out of the prison with 1 bag of belongings and $500 the state gave him for transitional expenses. Hirsch was waiting in the parking lot. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The drive back to the city felt surreal. Everything looked different, bigger, faster, more overwhelming than he remembered. Hirsch had arranged for a halfway house, a small room in a facility that helped parolees transition back to society. It wasn't much, but it was outside the walls. That first night of freedom, Dante lay in a bed that was softer than anything he'd slept on in 15 years and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Elena, about her testimony, about the fact that she'd been watching all these years. He pulled out his phone, a cheap prepaid Hirsch had given him, and typed out a message to the number his lawyer had provided. Thank you for what you said at the hearing. I don't deserve it, but I appreciate it. I hope you're happy wherever you are. You earned it. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came an hour later. You're welcome. I meant what I said. Be better than you were. That's all anyone can do. A pause. Then another message. I'm in Montana, running a small bookstore. It's quiet, simple, everything I needed. Dante smiled. Of course she was running a bookstore. That was so perfectly Elena. He typed back, that sounds perfect for you. I'm glad you found it. What will you do now? I don't know yet. Find a job. Stay clean. Try to help people. The literacy work was good. You should keep doing that. Maybe I will. Another pause. Then, take care of yourself, Dante. I mean that. You too. The conversation ended there. But it felt like something had closed. Some final chapter of their story reaching its conclusion. She'd destroyed him because he'd left her no choice. She'd watched him rebuild because part of her still cared. And now she was releasing him to figure out the rest on his own. It was more grace than he deserved. But he'd take it. The next morning, Dante started looking for work. It was harder than he'd expected. Nobody wanted to hire a 61-year-old ex-con with a murder conviction. He applied to 50 places in 2 weeks, got rejected from 49. The 50th was a community center in a rough part of town. They needed someone to teach adult literacy classes. The pay was barely above minimum wage. But it was something. The director, a woman named Carla, looked at his application and raised an eyebrow. You're overqualified, she said. You were running a multi-million-dollar operation. That was a long time ago, and it was illegal. Still, why do you want this job? Because I spent 15 years in prison learning to teach people to read, and I'm good at it. And maybe if I help enough people learn, it'll balance out some of the damage I did. Carla studied him. You really believe that? No, but I have to try anyway. She hired him. Dante started teaching classes 3 nights a week. Adults who'd never learned to read, immigrants working to improve their English. People like him who'd made mistakes and were trying to build something better. He was good at it, patient, understanding. He didn't judge because he had no room to judge. Slowly, he built a routine. Work. Meetings with his parole officer. Counseling sessions. Quiet evenings reading in his small room. It wasn't the life he had imagined at 61, but it was honest, real, built on helping instead of taking. 6 months into his release, Dante got a letter. Elena's handwriting. Inside was a photo, her standing in front of a small storefront, Clearwater books painted on the window. She was smiling, really smiling, the way she used to before he'd made her invisible. On the back she'd written, "Thought you'd want to see what freedom looks like. It's worth it. Keep going." Dante put the photo on his small desk, a reminder of what was possible when you chose to be better than your worst moments. A year after his release, one of his students graduated from the literacy program. A woman in her 50s named Rosa, who'd never learned to read because she'd been working since she was 8 years old. She hugged Dante after the ceremony, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. You changed my life." "You did the work," he said. "I just helped." "No. You saw me when other people didn't. You made me feel like I mattered." Dante felt something crack open in his chest, because he understood exactly what she meant, about being invisible, about needing someone to see you. That's what Elena had needed, what he'd failed to give her until it was too late. But maybe that's what he could give other people now, the gift of being seen, of mattering, of knowing someone cared enough to help. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. 5 years after his release, Dante's parole ended. He was fully free. No more check-ins, no more restrictions. He was 66. Gray hair. A body that ached in ways it didn't used to. But alive. Employed. Useful. He still taught at the community center, had expanded the program to 5 nights a week, had helped over 200 people learn to read. It was the best work he'd ever done. One evening after class, he was locking up when he saw a familiar car in the parking lot. He walked over. The window rolled down. Elena sat in the driver's seat. She looked older, but good, healthy, at peace. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Dante couldn't quite believe she was here. "What are you doing?" "I was in town visiting a friend. Thought I'd stop by, see how you're doing." "I'm good, teaching, staying out of trouble. I heard. Carla sends me updates sometimes." "You know Carla? I helped fund the literacy program, anonymous donation, but I wanted to make sure it was being used well." She smiled slightly. "You're doing good work, Dante." "I'm trying." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Elena said, "I forgave you a long time ago. I needed you to know that. I don't deserve. It's not about deserving, it's about letting go. I couldn't move forward while I was carrying all that anger, so I forgave you. Not for your sake, for mine." Dante felt tears prick his eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything. For making you invisible. For forcing you to destroy me just to be free." "I know. And I'm sorry, too, for the things I had to do, for the pain it caused, for not finding another way." "There wasn't another way. I wouldn't have listened." "No, you wouldn't have." She put the car in drive. "Take care of yourself." "You too." She drove away. Dante watched until the taillights disappeared around a corner. Then he walked back to his apartment, made himself dinner, read for a while, went to bed. The next morning, he woke up and did it all again. Teaching, helping, being useful. It wasn't the empire he'd built, wasn't the power or the money or the respect he'd once craved, but it was real. And it was his. And nobody could take it away. Because here's the thing about power that Dante Bianchi learned too late. Real power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself. About choosing to be better even when being worse would be easier. About helping instead of taking. About seeing people instead of using them. Elena had understood that from the beginning. She'd used the power he'd taught her about, leverage, control, patience, to free herself from a life that was killing her slowly. She'd made the hard choice, the painful one, the one that cost everything but saved her life. And in destroying him, she'd given him a chance to understand what he'd been too blind to see when they were together. That you don't build a legacy through violence and fear. You build it through the small, quiet moments of treating people like they matter, through helping someone learn to read, through showing up day after day even when it's hard, through choosing to be useful instead of powerful. Dante would never get back the years he'd lost, would never undo the damage he'd caused, would never bring back the people he'd had killed or fix the families destroyed by his drugs. But he could spend the rest of his life trying to balance the scales, one student at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one choice to be better than he was. It wasn't redemption, but it was all he had. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough.